Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to Love and Abuse. If you are a longtime listener, I am back. It's been a while, probably a couple months. If you are tuning into this show for the first time, I've got a whole library of episodes out there. We're on, what are we on? Number 96 right now. Like the beginning of every episode, I like to tell you all the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. Today is, or at least as of this recording, today is July 4th, 2022. And I thought, okay, I really want to come out with an episode on your independence. And what a day for it, Independence Day, at least in America. I know that this is listened to all over the world, but let's just look at this as your Independence Day, or at least thinking about your independence. And I don't mean breaking up with someone or being alone, and you may be there now, that's okay, but I'm talking about the different types of dependencies that we have on people and things, but usually things related to people. And I'll get into this momentarily, but I think I know it's helpful for your life to be less dependent on anything and anyone. In fact, in my Mean Workbook over at loveandabuse.com, I talk about the concept of being independent. And what you do, and this is what I say in the workbook, is that you are less likely to be manipulated when you stabilize your emotional, physical, and even financial state, if possible, so that you are not so dependent on someone else for all your needs. You are also less likely to be manipulated when you feel more secure inside yourself, not letting fear dictate your decisions. This is straight out of the workbook. When you learn to trust yourself and your instincts with an increased level of self-confidence, when you love yourself and you know that you are worthy and that you matter, you're less likely to be manipulated when you are more compassionate toward yourself, remembering that your emotions are valid and important. And the last one I have here on my list is you're less likely to be manipulated when you become more comfortable making decisions, even when you're unsure of the outcome. And in this particular episode about independence, or becoming more free of dependencies, of attachments, I want to emphasize a few things. One of them is when you become less dependent on someone else to make your decisions, you become more free to be yourself and less likely to be manipulated or to give someone power over you. So I'm going to list a few of these things, and some of them won't be possible, I know. Some of them won't be possible. Some people listening right now have families and attachments that they can't necessarily get out of. Not that they're trying to get out of a family attachment, but maybe they are, maybe you are. But I realize that not all of these will be possible, but every single little component and any single thing that you remove as an attachment or a dependency can help you gain more power. The person who walks with no attachments and no dependencies has all their power. They may not feel like that sometimes, but they have at least the ability to make decisions without anyone's influence. And I think that's important. You should have the ability to make a decision even if somebody's influencing you. And again, not all of this is possible, but that's one of the dependencies that I'm sharing with you today, a decision dependency, when you rely on someone else for you to make your decisions. I know I can't. I can't just make a decision and, well, I mean, I can make most decisions okay, but with my girlfriend, we live together, we share bills, my decisions affect her, her decisions affect me. And so what ends up happening is that as long as you're in a relationship or with somebody, in a relationship with a friend or a family member even, that when you have to make a decision that affects someone else, then obviously you're not going to have full control, and you may not feel, and you may not be, fully empowered. And that's the whole concept of today's episode, is the more independent you are, the less someone can have power over you, the less someone can manipulate you, can emotionally abuse you. So this is just something to think about. Where are you dependent in your life? What attachments do you have in your life that you believe you need, or you know you have, that you can't get rid of? And what can you do? And that's another way to look at this. We look at the positive side of this. What can we do instead of what can't we do? For example, there's something that most of us, maybe all of us, can do. And that's to let go of our emotional dependencies. I used to have a lot of emotional dependency on my partner for my happiness, for my love, for feelings of peace and comfort. And because they were my sole source of this, or at least a good 98% of it, I was clingy, I was possessive, I became emotionally abusive, I was hurtful toward them. Because if they weren't providing that, then I feared not having it. I was afraid of abandonment, I was afraid of rejection. I had those fears. And when they would go out with their friends, for example, one of my partners in my life, I would make them feel guilty, I would make them feel bad. And so that created an issue, because I had such a dependency for them being in my life, for them fulfilling a role that I assigned to them. And maybe they took on at first, but they didn't realize how big of a role it was. But I depended on them for my emotional needs. So I had this emotional dependency that created issues in the relationship. And both sides of an emotionally abusive relationship can do this. The emotional abuser, the victim, we can have a lot of dependency on someone else to fulfill our emotional needs. And when that happens, we're more likely to be hurt, not only by them, but by ourselves. We are likely to expose ourselves to hurtful people when we have an emotional need for them to show up in our lives in some way. So I'm not, everything I'm sharing today, I'm not saying that you can't have any of it. I'm saying the amount that you back off from some dependencies give you more power. If I told you that you seeking happiness from someone else and you can't be happy without them, if I told you that keeps you in an abusive situation, first of all, I don't want to blame you. I'm not telling you that's your fault. I'm just saying that if I told you that, if I said that's 100% true, how would it affect you? How would it change your decisions and what you do, how you live your life? Would it change your life at all? If I look at my own situation and I said, okay, my girlfriend, I can't live without her because I love her and she makes me happy. But what if we separated? What if we went our own ways? Am I at the point with this emotional dependency I have on her, with her? Am I at a point where I'm going to give up happiness? That's my thought. Am I going to give up happiness if I give her up? Or if I don't have a choice? If we go our own separate ways, will my happiness end? I mean, that's a big word, happiness. And I'm putting it all on her, or at least in this example. My happiness is not dependent on her. So my happiness comes from somewhere else. I can look at it as coming from inside me, but I think all of us get happiness from other places too, and other people. But are those things our only source of happiness? My only source of happiness isn't me, but I do have happiness. I can get it inside of me, from me. It's not my only source, because I really love being in relationships. I love my girlfriend. I love being happy. I know that she makes me happy. But if we were separated and she didn't want to be with me anymore, I would be sad. But would I be sad forever? The answer can be tough thinking about it because, what if she died? Would I be happy then? That would be awful. And I would have to face it as it came. I would have to deal with it. But I look in my past and I see all the breakups I've had. I see all the relationships I've been through. And I was able to get happy after all these breakups. So I know it's possible. So it's important for me to understand that even if something happened with this relationship, that I wouldn't just be unhappy for the rest of my life. I used to believe that, and a lot of people do. A lot of people believe that their happiness comes from somebody else. And I believe that happiness comes from a lot of places and a lot of people, including myself. And I think that's a healthy belief to have. And having that belief keeps me out of what could be an emotionally toxic situation. I don't want to think that I can only get happiness from my girlfriend, or I can only find a motherly love from my mother. That's a weird one. It is, I know, but it can be a healthier thought. This is my opinion. It can be a healthier thought to believe that a motherly love, when you have a toxic mom and you can't get that motherly love, or father or whatever, when you can't get it, it can be found in other ways with other people. Not always. And not all people are capable of doing this. And maybe you'll never meet someone that has a parental type of love when you have toxic parents, or, one of them is toxic. But I'm just saying that there are other people, there are other places, there are other things you can do to be loved, to feel love. It's just that sometimes we have such a dependency and such an attachment on that person. That person needs to be the one to love us. That person needs to be the one to make us happy. And I learned after my marriage that it doesn't have to be that person to bring us those feelings. I mean, if somebody came along that was just like them but better, just as attractive if they're a romantic partner, but better looking maybe, just makes you feel just as good as you did but better maybe, gave you love just like the other person did but more love. I mean, let's just say that somebody came along that was just like somebody you loved or love, and they made you feel even better. They made you feel like you were on top of the world. Then would you be so sure that the other person was the only person that could bring you this stuff? I don't tell you any of this to make you think that you can just get love anywhere you want. You can get happiness anywhere you want. I'm just saying that we sometimes get stuck thinking that only one person can do what they can do for us. They are the ones that can make us happy, can make us feel good, to make us feel love. And it's not true. Sometimes those people aren't in our lives, but it's good to know, in my opinion, I think it's helpful to know that there are other people out there as well. It's just that we might get stuck on that one person. So let me go on about this dependency stuff. Emotional dependency, what I just talked about. Decision dependency, when you have somebody else in your life that you can't make decisions without. I'm not saying all of these are possible. I just want you to keep them in mind. Physical dependencies. What can you do or not do without someone else in your life? Some people have physical dependencies or disabilities, and they need someone else to be there to help them. And I've seen some amazing disabled people do amazing things. They seem to get around on their own, and they can also use help. I'm not talking necessarily about disabilities, but in a way, if physical dependency usually points to some sort of disability of some sort, even if it's not legally called a disability. So if you, for example, this is a bad example, but you can't reach the top shelf and you need someone else to come along. That could be a physical dependency on someone else. But if they weren't there, what would you do? You'd probably get your little step stool or a chair. You'd figure it out. That's not necessarily a disability. It's just something that you can't do and somebody else can. And we might develop attachments to people that can do the things that we can't do, or we haven't learned to do, or we don't feel the need to do because they're around. This is just something to think about. Again, any type of physical dependency. If we can lower the number of times we're dependent on someone else, then they won't have power over us. For example, the abusive person, they purposefully put things on the top shelf because they know it bothers you. And then they say, oh, I forgot, you can't reach. That'll be all part of the abuse cycle. They're gaslighting you or something. So you see it over and over again, and you mention it over and over again, and they keep making you feel bad for some reason. They want you to feel bad. They want you to feel incompetent. They want you to feel like you're short or whatever. They're doing things to make you feel bad. And so you have to address it with them because you can't reach. And that's their opportunity to make you feel bad. So let's remove these opportunities to make you feel bad hopefully by becoming more independent where we can. Let's get that step stool out, reach it ourselves, and let's not talk about it anymore. Let's not even mention it, because what will happen is they'll stop doing it because they're not getting the feedback they want. I'm not saying this is a perfect solution or a solution at all. I'm saying, what little steps can we do to become less dependent on someone that creates or completes the abuse cycle? That can happen, and all of this is part of it. If you need someone else to make a decision or do something, and they take advantage of that opportunity and put you down, belittle you, make you feel bad, make you feel guilty, then how can we remove at least that one thing from the relationship? How can we remove that one dependency or that one event to make life a little bit easier? And if this is your first time listening, you might be asking, why don't you just tell people to leave? Why are you telling people in relationships or abusive relationships that they should just adjust? Oh, this happens sometimes. People will listen to one episode of the show and think that's my thought, that I want people to stay in abusive relationships. No, it's not that at all. I want you to have power to make your own decision to do what's right for you. This is all about getting your power back. If you want to leave, that's your choice. If you want to stay, that's your choice. If you believe there's hope, that's still your choice. I'm just giving you the tools you need so that if and when you're ready to do whatever you need to do, you have the power to do it. So I don't want anybody to hear this and think, wow, this guy is telling him the wrong stuff. No, listen to my other episodes. Listen to a few of them, and you'll understand what I'm saying here. It's all about empowering you. And I believe removing dependencies, or at least minimizing dependencies, helps to empower you more. Gives you some of your brain back. It's another one. It's not a thinking dependency, but it's sort of a decision dependency. It's how you think. I guess it's a thinking dependency in a way, because you are influenced by someone else when they're in your life. And the more they're in your brain, I would probably call that a disability sometimes. The more someone else that might be toxic is in your brain, in your decision-making process, in your thinking, the more influenced you are by them, and the less likely you'll know your own thoughts. So that's kind of a tricky, dangerous area, because people are in our lives, they're in our thoughts, they're in our decision-making processes. I'm going to the store. I wonder if so-and-so wants anything. I better go ask. That is them influencing our thoughts without even them being in the room, because we can't think without certain people in our thoughts sometimes. So that is a dependency, a thinking dependency with them in our thoughts. And this might be the hardest one, actually, because if we're around someone, they're going to be in our thoughts. And we might think, okay, let me take this person out of my thoughts, but it might cause a problem if I do that. If I go to the store and don't tell my girlfriend I'm going to the store and I come back, she's going to ask, why didn't you tell me you were going to the store? Well, because I wanted to practice independent thinking. I wanted to be independent of your influence. that's probably not going to work. It's not going to work well. But I'm giving you this concept, especially because when you're away from a toxic person for a period of time, and it usually takes, in my experience, 2 to 4 months to be away from a toxic person, eventually your head clears and your thinking dependencies start becoming more free. I mean, your thinking becomes more free. Your dependencies minimize. And the more you think throughout this 2 to 4 month and beyond period of time, the less they are influencing you. Again, they don't even have to be in the room. They don't have to be anywhere. You could be no contact with them completely, but they're still in your mind. And this is what happened to many of my clients when I worked with them directly, and my mom, who was in an abusive relationship for 40 plus years. It took her 2 to 4 months to be free of those toxic thoughts. And those toxic thoughts were basically, anything I do, he is involved with in some way. So every thought I have has that toxicity in it. Meaning I can't even go to the store without thinking about him. I can't even sit outside without thinking about him because my thoughts keep gravitating back toward him. Talking about my stepfather, her ex. She could sit outside and enjoy herself, but that'll only last so long because she's worried about him coming out, or coming outside and bothering her or hurting her. She's worried about him drinking, and is he going to ruin the moment? She's worried about when she has friends over, and is he going to be an embarrassment? She's worried about having family over, and family has suffered because of him being in her life, and she's not been able to see certain family members because they won't come over because he existed in her life at that time. So every single thought that she had involved him, and it took her several months to finally flush those thoughts away. And she didn't do it purposefully. It just happened. Because I remember the first 2 months after they split up, I asked her the question. This was more of a joke than anything. I said, hey, if he said, I want to come back, will you let me back? I was just joking. And she said, I might. And I thought, that's crazy. Are you serious? You finally got away from him, and now you are free. You are living on your own and you're free of him. You have told me repeatedly how much you hated him, how much you hated being around him or near him, and that you wish he would just go away. She used much harsher language, much more bold language. And when she said, I might consider taking him back, I thought, what? My mind was blown. And it really taught me a lot. It really taught me a lot of how much that trauma bond can take a hold of us. And after the 2 month period, I'll talk about trauma bond in a second, but after the 2 month period, she came to me and said, when I said that I would take him back, I can't believe I said that. She said, I don't know what the F I was thinking. I would never take him back. I can't believe I said that. So I changed my answer. And from that point on, she was absolutely clear about what she wanted, because she wasn't thinking straight. She wasn't thinking straight within that 2 to 4 month window that I often see. And our heads can be foggy, and they need that fog to lift. We need that fog to lift so we can think more clearly. But we can't think clearly when their influence is still in there. It's like they are a thought form inside of our head that everything we think, they're still there. And we realize, I can't do this because they're still in my thoughts, or I'm afraid to do this because they're still there. If I do X, Y, Z, they're going to be involved in some way, so I better not, or I better do it a certain way. It affects our thoughts. Their influence in our brain affects our thoughts. So when that fog lifted for her, she swore, I don't know what the F I was thinking. And I was proud of her for finally feeling her power. That was when her power really kicked in, is when she finally was independent of his influence. And that didn't come for a little while, because even after they separated, even though she was independent of him being in the proximity of her, she still wasn't free of his power over her. And that's how some people can influence you. They can have power over you even when they're not in the room, even when they're 1,000 miles away. We can still feel that power over us that we may not even call power over us, but they can have that, especially if they were very toxic and there's been some sort of trauma bonding, which I want to talk about traumatic bonds, which are the results of dependencies. The more love and support you seek from an abusive person, the more likely you'll become traumatically bonded to them. If you haven't heard me talk about this before or you don't know the term, trauma bonding is when you equate love and abuse. In order to get love, I need to be abused. In order to feel good, I need to feel bad. I mean, I'm way oversimplifying it. But a trauma bond forms when you're in a toxic relationship, especially one that started off great, which they almost all do. All toxic relationships start off great, and they feed us what we crave. The toxic person feeds us what we crave, that love, that support, that connection, sometimes the best relationship we've ever experienced. And so we know that they have that in them. They have this love and this generosity, and they support us, and they make us feel so good. And so this is one end of the pendulum swing. But then they start hurting us. They start being toxic in many, many ways. And then we have this weird feeling where we love them and we're hurt by them. But we want to feel that love, but it's so traumatic because love comes with baggage. And when love comes with all this baggage, it forms a trauma bond. And so that's what, I mean, you can read up on it, but trauma bonding or traumatic bonds, they form from dependencies, or at least one way. That's one way they form. The more love and support you seek from an abusive person, the more likely you'll become traumatically bonded to them. And when you're dependent on someone giving you love, giving you support, giving you finances, they're helping you out financially and physically, and they are helping you have these feelings, at least especially in the beginning, then what ends up happening is that you rely on them more and more and more. And because of all those reliances, all those dependencies, and the feelings of love that started off right at the beginning, you now have a bond with them that is hard to break, because when they start acting badly, it's hard to see that they're this bad person now. It's hard to see them for who they're showing up as, is really what I should say. In the beginning, if it's a romantic relationship especially, they showed up in every wonderful way we can think of. Every wonderful way we wanted and we didn't know we wanted. And then when the bad behavior, the toxic behavior started coming out, they showed up in ways we didn't want, but we were so attached to what we loved about them that it's hard to let go of that attachment. Why? Because we're loving people, or at least you're a loving person. You're very supportive and generous, and you give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to make some assumptions here, but this is what happens. This is why you might get involved with a toxic person and stay with a toxic person, because you are so kind and generous and loving and compassionate and supportive that you just can't let go of the attachment to who they were and see them for who they are. And I'm not saying that they can't be that way again. Some people can absolutely be that way again. They just need to find that in themselves and heal all these toxic coping mechanisms that they created or developed over the years that causes the hurt. And if they're operating on survival mechanisms and using old coping mechanisms that don't seem to help but only hurt, then what ends up happening is that we see someone that looks like they may even be struggling, but what they're doing is really hurting us, and they're struggling, but they're not looking at their own struggles. They're just pushing all that struggle onto you. They don't want to deal with it. A lot of them, they don't want to deal with it. So they push it onto you, and they have problems dealing with it. That's their coping mechanisms. If they're on survival mode, it's, somebody else has to pay for that so they can deal with life. They can survive the moments. And so it gets pushed on to the other person so that they don't have to deal with it. I talk about this in my Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. And I've written a lot of lessons over there especially on coping mechanisms, especially on emotional triggers. And I've talked about over and over again what it takes to start dealing with these coping mechanisms and start healing from this old way of thinking, because what ends up happening is that we tend to push what we don't want to deal with onto someone else. I mean, when we're toxic, or at least when people are toxic, we will push what we don't want to deal with, what we don't want to feel, onto someone else. And so I was going to mention right at the beginning of the show, but I forgot, I've been absent for 2 months from Love and Abuse. And that's because I've been busy as heck, believe it or not, helping you. I've been helping people, victims of emotional abuse, by helping the emotionally abusive people heal. I've been working on that Healed Being program for probably over a year now, but the last couple months I've been really buckling down and making sure that I get the best material I can for them so that they will stop hurting you. And I know some people listening have sent people to Healed Being hoping it would help them. And I'm just here to tell you now, if the other person doesn't want help and doesn't think they need help and hasn't asked for help, sending them to Healed Being or any program or therapy or anything that you think should or would help might be a bad idea. Well, let's just put it this way. It might not be a good idea. Because what will end up happening, very likely, is that they'll resist it and never look at it. And they will resist it so much that there may be less of a chance that they'll heal. This is why I try to teach you empowerment, like I teach them empowerment over there, but it's a different set of circumstances, a different set of rules. It's a different side of the coin. But over here, at Love and Abuse, I'm teaching you empowerment so that when bad behavior comes your way, you can say, no thanks. I don't want this behavior in my life. That doesn't mean you kick them out. It doesn't mean you never see them again. It just means I don't want this behavior in my life. I don't want you hurting me in my life. I don't want it. And I'm not going to take it anymore. So whatever's going on in your life, you need to work on that, because where I am, from my perspective, you're hurting me, and that's not loving. That's not caring. That's not compassionate. That's not supportive. And then, toxic people will say, well, you're hurting me too. That might be true. You could be hurting them too. In fact, I would answer that same way. That might be true. I could be hurting you. And I don't want to do that. But I know for a fact that you're hurting me. So if I'm hurting you too, tell me how I'm doing it and I'll work on that. But here's how you're hurting me. And you need to work on that. And then if they say, I don't need help, you do, then you're dealing with a brick wall. And this is why I'm saying, if you tell someone, hey, go seek therapy, that they may resist that unless they want to. But if you said, you're hurting me and I'm not going to take it anymore, that might be exactly what they need to hear. I'm not going to take this behavior anymore, so whatever you need to do to stop doing that behavior, that might be something you want to look at, because I'm not going to take it anymore. You don't even have to say that. You don't have to tell them whatever you need to do. You could just say, I'm not going to take it anymore, because it's about empowerment. It's about empowering you so that you can make decisions that are right for you. And if somebody else wants to come along for your ride, the ride you're giving in life, who you are, if somebody wants to be with who you are, then they need to play by the rules. And I'm not saying that you need to tell them what the rules are. I'm just saying you tell them how you don't like being treated or how you like being treated. And you make it known, this is how I want to be treated. You might even ask them in so many words, are you capable of doing that? Or if you're not, then maybe something else needs to happen. I'm not saying that any of this is what you say. I'm not saying that you say this to a violent person. I'm just hopefully trying to give you some empowerment tools, even if it empowers your thinking and not your actions. Because eventually your actions will come through. Your actions will follow your thinking. And so we have all these dependencies in our life, and how can we remove some of them or minimize some of them so that we can start working on any trauma bonds that have formed, so that we can feel like we are capable of doing more on our own without them, so that we can feel better in some ways without them. Not that we can't feel good with certain people, because they will bring us certain feelings. Sometimes those feelings are happiness and joy and peace and comfort, and sometimes they're not. So we start to make these little changes in our thinking and our behaviors and our decisions, and start creating the runway that we want to take off on and fly to the emotional destination, if I may use that analogy, fly to the emotional destination that we want. I want to be happy, so this, and this make me unhappy. And this, and this hurt me. Can we work on this? Can we change this? Because if the answer is no, I might have to fly solo. Sorry if I'm going too far with the analogies, but I'm just trying to help you get to that point where you have fewer dependencies, fewer emotional attachments that allow you to feel good inside yourself, so that you can bring this good feeling, good, loving, compassionate, caring person into somebody else's life where they want to do the same for you. When they don't want to do the same thing for you, we might have an issue. We might have a difference of opinion, or a difference in our approach, or our personalities are too clashing and we can't get along, because on one side you have love and connection and support. On the other side, we have power and control and dominance. And how does that work? That's not equal to me. And as adults, if you're listening, you're probably an adult, and you probably have some sort of loving relationship, or at least you want to have some sort of loving relationship. As adults, we should all treat each other like we want to be treated. I know it's an old saying, but I think it works. I think it's a great way to look at it. I want to be treated with love, kindness, and respect. Will you do that for me? If the answer is no, because you don't do it for me, then the answer may be, okay, well, maybe we won't get along. I'm not saying that's the final answer. I'm just saying, okay, but we just have to look at the reality here. If you say you're not going to treat me with kindness and respect, then I guess it's just not going to work. That's very final. Again, just a concept, just a thought process, a different kind of thought form I want floating around in your head, so that you don't sit back and take behavior that you don't deserve. And you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. You'll hear me say it again at the end. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy Minimizing Dependencies Day. Just do the best you can, and don't beat yourself up. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. You can download the workbook today to help you determine if you're in an emotionally abusive relationship. It'll give you the tools to pinpoint the specific unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. If you're in a difficult relationship and want to know what your next steps should be, the assessment and workbook will help you make decisions that are right for you. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing emotionally abusive behavior and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. We'll talk again soon.